Good morning, everyone. This is True North Now, episode 6. We are joined with Andrew Webley, the CEO of the SmarterWeb company. Second time he's been on. Last time we had a fantastic conversation. This time, I think we're going to have an equally great conversation. So, Andrew, Bitcoin just hit 123,000. Things are very, very hot in the market. We are seeing a bit of a retrace today. No big deal. We're still sitting around 116, 117. So with that little lead in, tell me, where do you think SmarterWeb is right now? How are you feeling about the markets? How are you feeling about your strategy, the execution, everything? Just give us a good rundown.
Yeah, well, I'm pleased at the moment. As we like to say, we're doing okay.
You are doing okay. I would agree.
Yeah, we announced last Friday, I think it was, uh, that we've got to 1275 Bitcoin held. So that's quite pleasing. I think that everyone knows, using the publicly available information, that we can get significantly above 1,500 with the Bitcoin that we've got. When you combine it with the cash, reasonable amount above that. So I'm pleased with that. I was looking earlier today at some of the league tables. BitcoinTreasuries.net is one that I use a lot, and I think based on our current treasury, I think that would probably put us in the top 25 of global companies. So I think that's a good start. We've got to remember that we're only just over 2 months into life as a public company. So I'm pleased with that. I think our strategy is working well with our approach to how we raise capital and how we take the capital as pounds and then deploy it into Bitcoin. I think that's working very well at the moment. And I think that over time, everyone can see that into the future, but also if they look back at the last couple of months. So yeah, it's pretty good so far. There's lots of things that are going on behind the scenes as well that I can't talk about at the moment, which I'm pleased about as well. So my job as the CEO is to focus on not so much the day-to-day movement of things, but very much onto if we're heading in the right direction. And I believe that we are at the moment.
Yeah, I would agree. I've been following you fairly closely. I think you do have a good plan. I think you do have a good execution strategy. And along those lines, something recently has come up, in conversations on X about your cash position, your execution timing, things of that nature. Some feel that having cash on a balance sheet is a wrong view or a wrong execution strategy of the sailor strategy altogether. Others believe that having a balanced approach where you do maintain somewhat of a cash position makes sense as well. So give some insight. What are some of your thoughts on that? I know that X can be a very, very loud place when it comes to commentary, but I did see that you did interact with some of those comments. So would you share some of your thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, sure. So when we first IPO'd, some great people, they critiqued the strategy ever so slightly, and then as time went on, everyone saw that the strategy worked as we've done it. I think it's important to say that where we've been for the first 2 months is different to where we'll be in the second 2 months. So the strategy changes over time. As with any good business, you evolve, you adapt. But our strategy, if you look back at my early interviews, you'll see that there's still a delay, small delay in deploying cash into Bitcoin. We are an operating business, so we're not so reliant on capital raising to generate the capital to survive, which is really important in not just the regulatory position in the UK, but also in terms of having a long-term successful business that has adopted a Bitcoin treasury strategy. So yeah, I think obviously I know exactly where we are at the moment, and there's certain information that's been updated, and we update the market as quickly as we can on things. But I think we're in an excellent position, and I'm very much looking forward to the coming weeks and months.
Good. I think that it's very easy for people in the community to get caught up in narratives, and I just like to remind everyone that Bitcoin, the Bitcoin treasury companies, these aren't adversarial plays; these are cooperative plays. So I think that execution, there's a lot of things that go into it as operating company. So I want to urge people to not get too bogged down in narratives, perhaps. And along those lines, one of the things you have said consistently is you want to be the largest company in the UK, right? Um, just on a factor of Bitcoin's potential price trajectory and a continuous acquisition strategy, I think that is something that you can actually achieve, especially in the UK. Um, Not to put you on the spot, but if you do see a future where you are the largest company in the UK, and since that is the goal, how long do you think it's going to take to get there? And is that a position that you think that you can hold? And I want to be very, very specific here by holding, right? When you get to that point, I know you have three levers to your business. You have the operating business, you have the Bitcoin acquisition strategy, and you have potential acquisition strategy. So where do you see those three rungs going if you do become the largest company in the UK?
Yeah, so I think about a company like ours in terms of what we've got to do today and in the coming months, but then I also think about much longer term. And I think it's quite simple. If you're an incredibly well capitalized business with an incredibly strong balance sheet, I think you, by default, you become the equivalent of a bank of the future. So with that, you've got tremendous options that you can do. If it's probably, if you look at something like maybe Korea, I think that's probably the 80s, maybe that was the pivotal moment there when you had these massive trading companies that did everything under the sun. So maybe it evolves to something like that. Banking's not a very profitable thing in itself. So when I say a bank of the future, I just mean more like a capital, um, a company with a very, very strong capital position. I was in New York recently, just before we did the IPO, and I was walking around. I went up the Rockefeller Center, looking at the model at the bottom of the Rockefeller Center, and it struck out to me that maybe this is the best moment for 100 years, approximately 100 years when that was built. If you look at some of those big buildings in New York, they grew up from people and families and businesses that were incredibly well capitalized because they were in a unique point in time. And so that's kind of how I see this. So obviously the web design side of things is very, very important. The acquisition strategy is important, and building a business that's got a balance sheet that's built on the best asset in the world is incredibly important too. So I think we just retain our nimbleness. I've obviously done the maths in my head of what it means based on where we are today and the multiple of where we'd need to be. It's approximately 150, by the way, to be the biggest company in the UK. We've all got our own opinions, in sort of say a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, what Bitcoin will do. That's an element to it. Also the capital raising strategies, that's an element to it. Everyone laughed at me at the start when I said that I want my business to be in the FTSE 100, and they're not laughing now. Yeah, I believe that you should try and be the best. And our business is a UK business, listed in the UK, and why not try and be the biggest and the best company in the UK?
Yeah, exactly. Why not? So, piggybacking off of that, you are a UK company. You do have the regional exposure to the UK. You are serving as a Bitcoin exposure vehicle for a lot of the investors in the UK right now. And we talked about this in the previous live stream that there's not easy ways to get Bitcoin exposure in the UK. So, with that said, I know that for instance, with strategy and the preferred offerings, those are things that have gotten a lot of interest in the market, right? In terms of both investor sentiment and market perception with regards to what they can be used for, how they can be scaled, the different levers that allow strategy to have. So in that future where SmarterWeb is one of, or if not the largest company in the UK, do you see other offerings along those lines existing in SmarterWeb as part of the SmarterWeb, I guess you can say, SmarterWeb economy? I like to talk about strategies and economy. So in a way, you would be acting as an economy, a Bitcoin economy in the UK, if you do scale to that size, and if you do have potential preferred offerings or other offerings along those lines. I know you can't give specifics, but are those things that you are looking at, that you're interested in, that you think that could be interesting?
Yeah, for sure. Obviously time flies at the moment. I met Michael Saylor in London maybe 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about that. We were talking about what he would do, what he wouldn't do if he was doing things again. And I think the holy grail in the Bitcoin Treasury company is to have those additional lines of equity, bonds that are wrapped as equity, because effectively they're a convertible debt product which you're in control of. I think that is very much the way that we'll go. I can't say too much about it, but we've had initial discussions around how they get structured, the process, where they get listed, all these sorts of things. And I think it's just a case of we need to get to a certain size, not that much bigger than we are at the moment, but bigger than we are at the moment, until you can do those things. I don't think it'll be long, relatively speaking, until you see, smarter preferred products. I think the great thing about when you do those is that you're in control of it. So if you look at what Saylor's done with strategy, it's great because those products can complement each other. So you can give different pools of capital access to products that are beneficial to them, but then you can use those products, alongside each other, to manage effectively to manage your MNAV, to build the business over the longer term. Now, I think as you get bigger, it's good because it allows you to smooth out a bit of the volatility as well. Because, take a business our size, volatility is incredibly important. It's better, obviously, on a good day. No one really likes it on a bad day. But, if you take this week, for example, Monday, a down day, Tuesday so far, a down day. If Wednesday's an up day, then, our ATM-style facility will kick in. So as you're a bit smaller and you're getting bigger, you have different tools that are available to you. But when you get to a certain size, you can use some of those other tools, and they're really exciting. I think you probably need to get to a treasury of, let's say, 400, 500 million before it's worth doing that, because there is a cost to doing that as well. The great thing that we've got, thanks to Michael Saylor, is that there's someone out there educating the world, the people that buy these products, that these things do exist. And so, just like he's done for lots of the other things that businesses like us are doing, that walk is that little bit easier. And I'm truly grateful for all of that as well.
That's great context. Thank you. And those are some of the similar thoughts I had. I didn't want to press you too much on anything you can potentially talk about, but I'm glad that you gave that insight. And just keeping on this topic really quickly here, if you can't say too much on this, that's totally fine. I was just curious, would there be any sort of regulatory issues or roadblocks to having your own version of the preferreds in the UK market? Because I'm not very familiar if there would be, but I know that there's a question that will likely come up, so I'm just curious.
No, so when we were talking, I said to him, would you not be a bit annoyed? Because he said to me, just call it, like smarter stride, smarter strife, and, so on and so forth.
I saw that post. I saw a post that said that. Yep.
And I said, would you not be a bit annoyed if I just, ripped off, your names and put smarter in front of it? And he said, no, that's absolutely fine. And from a regulatory point of view, we can do that. Of course we can do that. It's just another product that you can, if you, what I've said since the start is that in most of the countries, the ones that I'm most familiar with are the UK and the US, of course, you've got the same toolbox. It's just how you use that toolbox. So if you look at us, we're one of the only, maybe even at the moment, the only company in the UK that's got an ATM-style facility. So just because something isn't done normally in a market, or something hasn't worked in the past, it doesn't mean to say that if it's not done right and if it's implemented it well, that you can do that. So, generally speaking, you can do the same stuff in the UK that you can do in the US, including the pref shares. So sometimes you have to call them different things. But no, there's no sort of regulatory challenge. The only challenge is, like I say, it's you do the right things at the right time when you're the right size. But that's the same as the other bits in the journey as well, in my opinion.
And along those lines of being able to do the same things just in different ways or having to call them different things, the ATM facility that you've created makes you a bit of a trendsetter in the UK, does it not? And I think that other UK companies that would like to impart on the Bitcoin journey, or including the ones that already exist, I would imagine that they would probably follow a similar model. And the reason why I bring that up is, do you see yourself as a deliberate trendsetter, or perhaps someone that's setting a trend just by virtue of being on the Bitcoin treasury journey? Or do you see this as just a natural progression of trying to, do what's being done in the US, following the strategy model in the UK, and you're just trying to find ways in which to do that?
A bit of both, really. So what I'm hopeful of is that you've got lots of other good players in our space that are all doing good things. And then maybe even someone can do something that we can sort of take inspiration from. So far, all of that inspiration has come from people in other countries. But I'm hoping that when we get more companies that are doing this well, then there'll be some of that. I think the problem that the UK market's got with people trying to do a facility, an ATM-style facility like us, is it won't work unless you've got liquidity. So I was looking at a report last night, and we do 10 times the volume of the next best, which is this is on a sample of yesterday, by the way, and that's considerably better than the majority of the others. So if you haven't got liquidity, those sorts of tools aren't really suitable for you. You're better off to put the work in, to build a business in the right way with the right capital structure and do those things at the right time. So for me, it's quite simple to do things, as we've done them, which is what I believe are the right things in the right way at the right times. But I don't think you can just have one. It has to, work to the benefit of it. Because otherwise you'll have an ATM and it will produce nothing. So yeah, but anyone is welcome to do that, and they're also welcome to say thank you if they want.
That
Might
good
not
point.
happen.
Yeah, they probably should. They probably should, quite frankly. But keeping along that point, you mentioned something that's very, very important with regards to the ATM. You said that you need the volume to be able to support it, which is perfectly true. But you also need sentiment, right? And one of the things I've said that some people strongly disagree with is that MNAV is a function of sentiment. And the reason why I bring that up is you are very, very engaged with the SmarterWeb investor community on X. You have the meme running of, we think we're doing okay, and everyone has picked up on it, and or that you're doing somewhat good, and that others have picked up on it as well. So you clearly, I think, understand the value of community engagement, investor sentiment, and how that can affect the broader perception of the equity. Is that something that comes to you naturally? Because I'm inclined to say yes, just based on your history. For instance, in your previous role, you had the top of the stocks, charts, and I thought that was a very, very clever pun on top of the pops. And people in the U.S. probably have no idea what I'm referring to right now. But it seems that you naturally lean into the meme, as I call it, right? You embrace the meme ability of the Bitcoin space, and that seems to be something that comes naturally to you. So do you think that as the front person of this journey, that investor engagement is something that you must do and you must actively participate in? Or do you think that it's something that you can eventually pull back from and allow the opportunity to take its own life and see where it goes? And I ask that specifically because if you take a look at GME, for instance, they're taking an entirely different approach. They're being very, very hands off. They're not engaging with the community. They're not, leaning into the memeability and leaning into the importance of sentiment in the community. And they have an entirely different model to follow. And I think it's a very, very interesting juxtaposition. So what are your thoughts on
Yeah, so the most important thing here to say is that, I set up the SmarterWeb company. Before it became a public company, it was 100% my business, and my wife's, obviously, because we were 50-50 shareholders. And I really care about it. The other reason, which is quite important, is I listed my business on the stock market in the UK because I wanted a business that I could invest in myself. And that's really important. So I'm not an opportunistic person that thinks that this is a way of making a couple of million quid or something. Um, this is something that I care about. I care about more about the success of the business than I do about my own personal financial position. Um, and I think because the UK's had such a torrid time for 10 or 15 years or however long it's been with the equity markets on the whole, there's been the odd blip, positive blip. I think that's why investors probably like it. So this isn't a promote, this isn't an opportunistic thing. This is something that I believe in, that I wanted for myself. And, that's how we're doing it. And then, if I look at my past, I've had some great times in investing, some really successful ones. And I've also had some, particularly one terrible, terrible investment. So I know what it's like to lose as well as to win through investing. And that's why for the last few years, when I've been planning exactly how I could do this and how I believe I can do it successfully, I've learned from all of the bad stuff as well as the good stuff. And I think people probably like that. If I was looking to invest in a Bitcoin treasury company in the UK, because I only hold one, which is our company, of course. I hold others globally. Then that's what I would look for. I suppose if we were chefs, it would be, if you can't eat your own cooking, that sort of a thing. But that's what I believe in. I've done everything in my career on that basis. And I think it's the right way of doing things. And that's how I've done it, and it seems to have worked okay so far. Um, you know, I've even bought shares on the market recently. I didn't have to do that. I could have bought them, before or not bought more. It doesn't make any difference to my holding, and it was a significant amount of money to me. I believe in this. I believe in it more than I believe in anything else. I've obviously got the luxury of obviously knowing exactly what we're doing, which means that also I can't buy shares at certain times. But yeah, it's just how I think it should be done at the end of the day. And whilst we're taking inspiration from some other things that people have done elsewhere, I've tried to do it all as I think it should be done. And with that, I'm sure there'll be the odd mistake further down the line. Um, hopefully not too many mistakes. And if there are mistakes, we'll be honest with people, and we'll do our best to sort of, address them. Because we're not perfect. So yeah, that's where it comes from. It's no more than that. It's at the end of the day, when people buy shares in your company, they want you to do the best job that you can. And if you can't do that for them, and to put in the time every single day and to communicate with them and things, perhaps you shouldn't be doing it. That's what I think, anyway.
I would agree. And along those lines, there's some, and I want to be very specific with what I'm saying here, that I'm not comparing you to strategy. I'm just drawing a parallel. There is a common parallel with the fact that Saylor is so invested in this plan because strategy is a company he started. He is very, he is very, very invested in it, both personally and professionally. He has, seen, as you mentioned, a nasty drop. We all know what people criticize him for with the dot-com bubble and so on and so forth. And you started SmarterWeb, and you are very, very invested in the current plan, both personally and professionally. And it does give you a level of authenticity based on the feedback I've gotten from the broader community that you are personally invested in this. And I bring that up to say this. You have mentioned in other interviews and recently here that there are some players in the market that may be not invested, not believers, but opportunistic. That they see an opportunity here to, make some money, to raise their stock price, kind of riding the wave of Bitcoin and being opportunistic in that sense. And so that leads me to a question here. Do you think that because of that potential opportunistic nature of some of the other plays in the market and the inevitable negative sentiment that will come because of that, because I think that opportunistic players are more likely to be shaken out, do you think that it is something that can negatively impact SmarterWeb? How do you see yourself navigating that? Do you see yourself staying the course and just being a player that's keeping the path and staying forthright and staying forward? Or do you see yourself as having to perhaps counterbalance that in terms of how you communicate with the market and how you address the market, just because the market may get, for lack of a better term, spooked if players start dropping out and if opportunistic players start being exposed?
I think the only thing that we can do is we can control what we do. So we've got something that we'll publish in the near future, which is a really good way that we can try and show the wider community and also the people that aren't so experienced in the Bitcoin community how they can understand the value of a company that holds Bitcoin on its balance sheet. So we're trying to do things like that. We've done a lot of work on the regulation side of things to try and make that better. But at the end of the day, we can't control, things that other companies may do. I can emphasize, if people lose money through these things, but I can't control that. All I can do is try and do my job to the best possible way. And this is very much a long-term mission. So, if there's a few bumps in the road that aren't caused by us, then I think we just have to carry on. I love it when the share price goes up. I don't like it so much when it goes down, but it's part and parcel of it. It's not, it's a bit bumpy, but personally, like when I'm investing in things, I like volatile things. It's how you get performance. So I think we just have to hope that no one does anything too bad. And that's not so much because of how it would hurt us, but it's because of how it would hurt people that get caught up investing in it. But hopefully that won't happen, or certainly not on any particular size. And I think that's all we can do. I got some advice from somebody who's been very successful in this space when I was in Vegas recently. And he said, you can't worry about what other people do, just focus on what you're doing, stick to your plan. And that's what we try and do. But, obviously we're only human beings. So you do look at what other people are doing and you think, why are you doing that? You don't have to do it like that. Like you could do it better, but, that's just the nature of the beast at the end of the day. And, you just stick to the plan.
I would agree. So last question I have for you, more of a fun question that you may or may not be able to answer. Bitcoin just hit 123,000 the other day. The sentiment was very high. Everyone was talking. I was talking about it. It was a great moment. And I think it caught a lot of people in the market off guard because there were so many different news posts about Bitcoin is going to 123,000. What does this mean? What does this say about Bitcoin? What does this say about the market? So two-part question. What do you think it means, if anything, that Bitcoin hit 123,000 recently? Is it just the natural progression of number go up? Or do you think that it's a representative of a broader shift in sentiment and perception about Bitcoin as an asset? And two, price prediction. Where do you think that we're going to be at the end of the year?
Yeah, so I hate that second question, but I will try and answer it.
Okay,
So
fair enough.
I was traveling when Bitcoin got to that level, and I was chuckling to myself when I was looking at it on my phone when it got to 121. Because obviously everyone likes the 21 number for lots of reasons, and I thought, how funny would that be if it stayed there but it smashed through it? Obviously, it's come off a little bit since, but and then I've been saying to some of our advisors for a couple of weeks now. I've been saying, obviously it's not impossible to buy Bitcoin because it's incredibly liquid and you can almost always buy it. But from some of the exchanges that we buy it from, because we buy it in a variety of different ways, I have noticed that it's been, relatively speaking, quite hard work to get Bitcoin at a good price. at some of those moments, which is quite unusual actually. Certainly in my experience anyway. But my experience is different because we've been buying bigger and bigger amounts, and but I'm fairly confident that what I've seen from the market over the last couple of weeks is, sort of suggesting of what would happen now. So, yeah, that's my take on that. And then in the second part of the question, the price level. Well, I think being selfish about it, talking about it purely from our company's point of view, I'm very glad that we've got the treasury that we've got at this point. I think we've managed to acquire a reasonable amount of Bitcoin in a fairly short time period, which gives us a really good base to build on for the future. So the key with a Bitcoin treasury company, in my opinion, is that the stronger Bitcoin is, the easier it is to raise capital and then, to keep that flywheel going. So, of course, the flip side of that is that the stronger Bitcoin is, the more expensive it is to buy. So, going back to our long-term approach and the fact that the longer-term investors should, in theory, do the best, that hold it for the longest amount of time, because that's the very nature of the compound model here. I think we're in a really good position. If Bitcoin rips, great. If it hovers here, fine. And we'll just see how it goes, really. I don't like talking about a price level. I think
Have a
probably
little fun with it. Come on, just throw a number out there.
I think your safest bet, if you want to sit on the fence, is just to go to 30% above where it was at the start of every single year. That's a pretty likely bet.
Lines up with the CAGR. It makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, we're not there yet. I put it this way. I wouldn't be surprised to see it the other side of 150. I've heard some significantly higher levels talked about, and then again, we've been hearing that for years as well. I genuinely believe we're going into the millions, probably multi-millions in the not too distant future. I'm 47, so let's say that's before I'm 55, 60, something like that, which is, that's considerable. So yeah, I'm as long as things keep getting better all the time for everything as a whole, then I can live without it ripping massively. But I do like watching it. It's great this weekend when it started to go. It was pretty cool. Pretty cool to see that, because the one criticism that some people have had is, why is it not doing a great deal? Me and my friends, we joke that, we used to think Bitcoin was, really the most exciting asset in terms of watching the price. Whereas now, obviously, it's all about Bitcoin treasury companies. And, I joked to someone earlier today that, sort of when in the UK, when we get the ETNs, which will hopefully be later this year, then, I'll probably get an allocation to that myself for the cautious part of my portfolio. But we'll see. But I'll be massively surprised if Bitcoin isn't higher than where it is today. And it's, as we're talking now, it's probably like, what is it, 117, 118, something like that.
Something like
dollars.
that, yeah, around.
So I'll be massively surprised if by the end of the year it's not, considerably higher.
Yeah, I'm actually aligned with you. I think that we're likely to see the other side of 150. The predictions of 3 to 4 to 500,000, I think, would be a little bit outlandish unless we have a change in liquidity and we have broader market stimulus in the form of money printing. But I'm aligned with you. I think that that's a fairly reasonable bet to make. And I was having fun with it this weekend as well. I was retweeting every time. It went to 119, then 120, then 121, then 122, then 123. I was retweeting the whole time. So I was enjoying it myself. But Andrew, any closing thoughts for the community? We had another great conversation. I know that they love hearing from you. So feel free to share any closing thoughts you have.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to everyone for all the support. We couldn't do this without the community. Our community on X I think it's got 3,500 people in it now.
Yeah, it started at 100, so that's great. That's great.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's it's amazing to see. I've been really busy this week so far, so I've not kept an eye on it quite as closely as I do. I try and check it, sort of once, twice, three times a day, just see what everyone's saying. I'm learning from what people say as well. So, if people are posting things, like the chances are I will see it at some point. I won't always agree with everything, but I welcome all input from everyone. So yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone, and we'll keep doing our best, and we believe that we've got the right strategy for the moment, and we'll just keep doing our best.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate you coming on here, and I'm looking forward to having you again. Thank you, everyone that watched us live. We are done with this episode for today. There'll be more episodes in the future with Andrew and with others in the space, and I look forward to and appreciate your viewership. So thank you for joining us both and everyone in the space on this journey. But I'm going to close today, say thank you yet again, and hope to see you again soon. Bye, everyone.
See you soon. Yeah.